You're live.
All right, it is now 5:43 p.m. I am here at the Government Operations Committee meeting, and I am Chair Michael Beck. Joining me are members Councilor Mallard, Councilor Fish, Councilor Walker, and Councilor Dean. Thank you. Thank you all for joining the table. Our Councilor Leonard, Council Chair Hawes, Councilor Carson, Councilor Berlin, as well as Assistant City Manager Courtney O'Donnell. Before we go into our first order, I just wanted to just pass a reminder, as we discuss these items that, we are here to discuss ideas and scrutinize ideas and just making sure we're treating our members and guests with respect. Thank you. And moving on to order number one, accepting the 2026 annual report for the Advisory Committee on Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights. I believe we have the chair, vice chair here to present the report. You want to join us at the table?
Sure. Although, sorry, your wished over and over again. Hello, counselors. Thank you so much. My name is Katie Bryden, and I am the current chair of our advisory committee on racial inclusion and racial equity. Inclusion and human rights. And so your report was delivered in your latest packet. It's something that outlines the work that we accomplished in 2025. And it outlines not only what we did in terms of engaging with the community to promote awareness about different topics, also the policies and practices that we looked through, the ordinance and the programs that we evaluated, but also ways that we worked to elevate community concerns so that everyone feels like they have a chance to be heard as is outlined in our ordinance. So we began by addressing our leadership structure this year. That was one of the main things that we did because we had a couple of members who were not able to fulfill their commitment when they were appointed. However, we didn't have a mechanism to replace them. And so we were unable to meet quorum for many meetings, which really did hinder our ability to do the work that we cared about. So one of the things we did was looking at that ordinance to outline how we could better evaluate the attendance. And with that came also identifying a secretary as an elected position so that we could better keep records of attendance. In terms of community engagement and public input, we held a table. We hosted a table at Bangor Pride. We had a ton of individuals share feedback with us about what they would like to see from Bangor, gathered that data, presented it to the city's community development officer, who was also at that time looking for feedback about how to make Bangor just really evaluate what makes Bangor a place of belonging and how we might better support that. Additionally, we had a couple of different citizens come to the table to ask us to bring forward some ideas or practices that we could deliver to the city council. And what that looked like was us evaluating, answering questions, really sort of trying to frame out the best way to advance some work. One of those being individuals came to us after a representative from Bangor brought forward at the state level LD 1971, and then what could Bangor do to help push that forward in terms of identifying what the relationship between local law enforcement and ICE would look like. We presented that ordinance as a recommendation to the council to not engage with 287G agreements. And then we also, following our participation, or just as citizens listening to the December 12th workshop with the council, being able to hear ideas like that safe outdoor space and what a sanctioned encampment might look like, tried to meet with different collaborators and some city leaders to evaluate the best recommendations that we could present, which was also presented to you on January 5th. And that's really our key goals, is just hearing from citizens, helping to elevate the things that maybe with the very heavy load that each of you have and the staff have, what can we do to help make sure the citizens of Bangor feel heard, have a place to share their needs, and then evaluate the best way to bring that forward to be considered by council. We really looked to our ordinance a lot this year in terms of making sure that what we were doing was in line with the original development of that ordinance, just being that education, awareness, advisory piece on ordinances and, policies. So that is sort of the outline of this. We didn't have like a monthly review of our accomplishments, but that's what we wanted to highlight in our annual report this year. And I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Any questions for the chair of the ACRE committee? Councilor Fish?
From your inception and the original goal of task, like to look at our charter and our ordinances and HR and our hiring practices to see if there were any unintended areas left out to bring us up to compliance. And now I know citizens have come to you with concerns as well, but from the initial conception of looking at the charter and looking at ordinances and bringing them up to speed, sort of say. And, since we've had issues with quorums and issues filling the membership seat, it just seems like, I know you've brought things to council 2 or 3 times for resolves, and we discussed them and had advice from attorney even, and we rejected it. But it just seemed like instead of working with us collaboratively, I felt that we were bantering, so to say. And so I just, I think it's great to hear from the citizens, but I think it's also good to see what the direction of the council is, that we look for what we need or what we want. And then it might just save everybody a little bit of time, if we had that input first. So that's a little bit concerning, and I still know we've got 2, we're still short 2 members.
No.
Oh, are we?
No, yeah.
I thought we had.
Well, I think there's yes.
Oh, wait, that was just recently.
Yes, appointed, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we were able to, thankfully, with this ordinance change, fill those seats so that we could have full quorum. Absolutely. The other thing was that we did with our ordinance is also to establish a better partnership with the city council liaison position, and hearing what was happening at a city level and how we might better address that. And I do want to be clear that everything that we bring to the council, and I really have in every possible means tried to demonstrate that we're doing it as a means of recommendations and advice. And I certainly know that everybody here is here out of their own goodwill and big heart and love for Bangor. None of us want to waste people's times or be here if we don't have to. So I apologize if it felt like bantering. And if there's any recommendations the city might have on ways that we might better craft what is presented and how it's presented, our committee is always open to that feedback.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilor Dean and then Councilor Flynn.
I believe the committee started in October of 2020. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Brought about due to some racial inequity in high school levels. And from there, it's grown to be more citizen-wide. Do you still do a lot of work at the school level? And if you do we always hear about that, or is that in addition to what is presented here?
So this school, the city was the first one to sort of take the initiative in terms of creating sort of a mechanism for hearing about racial inequities. At the time, it was very directed at the school level. The city took that on really quickly, which is very impressive in terms of their commitment to hearing all of those voices. Since then, the school has developed its own separate advisory committee to the school board. And similarly, that committee is comprised of different individuals that have been identified in the community as having a specific lens of expertise with certain populations of people that attend school or live in Bangor. And so they have actually, it's a very similar model. And in past years, the advisory committee, your advisory committee to the city would meet with the advisory committee to the school. on a regular basis, on at least a quarterly basis, to talk about how things were, what was happening and how that was going. I will say that hasn't been happening recently, and I think that's just a matter of connecting with the new superintendent and finding ways that we might better be collaborative to make sure that there's a mechanism to share feedback both ways, since the school is such an integral part of our community.
Is there a representative from the school on
There
the
is.
committee?
Yes.
Okay, I noticed there was one younger.
Yeah,
person,
yeah.
so is that
Yep.
a Bangor High student?
Yes, it is.
Oh, great.
Yep.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry I didn't say that. Emmy's great. I should have said that. We love you, Emmy.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for all of the hard work that you put into what you presented to the council. I didn't feel like it was bantering necessarily, but I think in a way we sort of need that back and forth. And I think you presented some really great, well thought out ideas, especially during a time when, we were dealing with a big issue. And it's a time when a lot of people are being targeted unfairly. And I think the fact that your group can pivot to what's going on and be there and sort of look at things through a different lens that we don't necessarily have the time as the full council to dig into, it's truly appreciated.
Counselor. And I do want to say that we talk about that often as a group. Like, we do have great privilege in that we don't have your workload. We don't have the amount of things that come to the city council. So being able to have the individuals that sit at our advisory table that have such immensely rich backgrounds in different areas of expertise and be able to come together on ways that we might support you, that is absolutely our priority. So thanks for recognizing that.
Other questions? So I'll go ahead and put you in the hot seat by putting myself in the hot seat. Now that you've had the council liaison position, that disclosure, it's me. Are there ways that you feel that the council liaison person and position can serve that committee and the council better? Because it's been a learning experience for me, and I know I haven't been perfect, but I would be open to any feedback you have that could make that relationship better.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that. I think that there are a lot of ways. I will say that since its inception of this committee, we've been through many iterations in terms of how we operate and what we present, in terms of trying to create subcommittees and then, trying to appoint people different areas of specialty. And I think that as it's grown and more citizens have learned that we exist and want to be able to bring forward ideas, it has sort of become this opportunity to catch people's voices and needs. And I recognize that it seems like we are bringing things out of left field as a result, because it's not maybe something that's on your report or something that you're looking for. And if anything, we would all really appreciate the opportunity to hear from council more often. Like, this is something that's coming down the pike. Can you look at this first? This is something that can you take this off of our plates? Like I said, people have the most amazingly impressive backgrounds on that committee. And I think that they are eager to be able to step in and support. So we've really taken, again, just the nature of 2025. So much of these human rights issues fell into our laps. But if there are other issues that we could address, in the past, looking at the plans for the new city hall to really evaluate the accessibility, right? If you're a wheelchair user, and being able to go up to the front and be able to actually talk to someone at a level that you can see them if you're using a wheelchair. That was something that we've done in the past that was really helpful. Anything that you have that maybe isn't on your immediate agenda, so that our committee can be as proactive and supportive as possible, is something we're really open to.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion to accept this report, and I believe it does that to the full council. So the motion would be to move this forward to the council.
Make a motion to move this to full council.
Okay.
Okay, one motion second. Do I have any doubt? Okay, this will go forward to the full council.
Thank you once
Thank you.
again, counselors. I appreciate it.
Thanks, David. All right, well, let's on to the next item, which is an ordinance amending the code of City of Bangor to repeal Article 6 of Chapter 23, which established the Advisory Committee on Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights. Who's going to be presenting that? Who wanted this? Who to present it?
Would you like, I mean, I'm certainly happy to introduce it.
I'm happy to read the action, if that's what it is. So the title of this ordinance would be to, title itself, sorry. It's amending the code of the City of Bangor to repeal Article 6 of Chapter 23, which established the Advisory Committee of Racial Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights. And the actual language of the ordinance basically just deletes the chapter, meaning the committee no longer would exist. So starting with that, who would like to speak first?
I will say that when I first read this, I felt like I was totally blindsided. I feel this should have come up in some sort of a workshop prior to a council action. It makes it look like this is something that we had discussed and brought about. And given the number of emails opposed to this, I would say this should have come about in a different way. And I was not happy with the way it came about.
Council Bloom?
Can we get some context behind this? Like why this, sorry, I'm not on this committee, but I guess I would just like a little like background. I don't know who to direct my question to, like as far as like why this is being presented, because I was caught off guard myself. And then when all of the emails, and we've, had dozens and dozens, they're still coming in, emails from the public. And I, like, when they first started coming in, I was like, what is this all about? Because I hadn't even had a moment to look at the council packet yet. And because I think maybe a little explanation in the agenda might have been warranted too, because to look at that, it looks like this is something that the entire council is asking for. And I will say that I had no conversations regarding this prior to seeing it on that agenda, and I am in definitely no way in favor of disbanding that committee, so.
Councilor Fish?
Councilor Walker.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Walker, yeah, go ahead, please.
As a member on this committee, I was, like has been said before me, I'm very shocked and very, didn't really know where this came from. When the email started to come in, I was very alarmed, very concerned for our community. And I read each and every email, and I am definitely not in favor of disbanding this. So I'm just kind of looking too for some background and where it came from and who started it, because it's the first that I heard of it was in an email, and I was kind of shocked about it. And I think it's unfair to us and to our community members.
Councilor Fish?
I guess I'm surprised to see it like this. I was kind of like, oh, wow. I think what first happened was I saw emails coming in, and I thought, well, what is this about? I don't think that I'm shocked we're having the conversation, because unfortunately, I think there's a great population in Bangor who do feel isolated and have not been happy with some of the actions. I know there's a grassroots tag team group of people that are very passionate about the subject with diversity and equality and inclusion, but the silent majority who do not dare to say anything because of their business and because of the outlash. And I'll just say myself, people from this committee themselves came and stood behind this podium and called me a white Christian Nazi. And that was totally wrong. And there's a lot of people out there in the public that feel that the committee, and they don't understand. They think that maybe there's even some counselors that are using the committee, or the committee is using some counselors to steer certain political, personal agendas. And I was disappointed to have this conversation tonight, because those people probably haven't seen the agenda. They've been away all weekend and they didn't have the chance. And we don't have that grassroots, oh, I see that, so I'm gonna, get in touch with the realtor community and the business community and the business downtown, the Chamber of Commerce, and have them innovate us with emails. So I see the passionate side, But I also see that when we have the committee come up here, and 3 times when they come up with a resolve, and we have discussed it at length, to be fair, for the 33,000 citizens that are immigrants, citizens, and natives, and when they feel that we are advocating more for, immigrants because of ICE, they feel that this is anti-Trump in the past 9 to 12 months, that it's, anti-ICE, and it's anti, speaking out against anything, and politics doesn't belong in here. We are here as a business to look at infrastructure and business and, yes, the welfare of our community. But in the last 12 months, to have, just the other night, 3 counselors said, I'm glad I went to the protest. I didn't come in and say, well, I'm glad that, we celebrated Charlie Kirk's life, because wasn't that horrible that he got his neck blown out with a 30-06, not a peep. And this isn't the place for it. Our political passions don't belong here. And when we get badgered and said, well, if you're not going to do what we tell you or you advise, what good are we? There's a lot of cultural and active community involvement. There's a list I tried today because I didn't have much time, of 30 or 40 cultural advocacy groups, experts for the immigrants, for diversity, for a lot of things, and for us to come in and spend the hours that we are. And then even when we collectively, democratically vote that this resolve really feels more divisive than inclusive, and community members are feeling that we are specializing and dividing and raising up certain communities above and beyond the others. So I'm not surprised that this has kind of come up for conversation. I was a little surprised it came up now and I was unprepared. But so I do believe that there's been at least some private conversations with more than one of us counselors, and I'm sure with the manager. And there is this frustration in the community. They don't dare to come and speak out because some of them have already had business, very negative and unpleasant things happen personally. So that's my take. I don't have the emails. I haven't had time. I had to work all weekend when we got this on 2:00 on Friday. So I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying that I have heard the other side of this, and that sometimes we forget, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. We forget that the 32,000 residents out there, the silent majority, don't dare to speak out.
Councilor Leonard.
So I have to disagree with you, Councilor Fish, on one major point. You said something along the lines that this is not the place for politics.
Councilor, I just wanted a reminder that
No.
we don't want to use personalities. We just
No. I'm not using personalities. In fact, I'm only going to refer to myself. But like it's just all politics is local. That's what politics actually is. And so I don't personally, I'm only speaking for myself, but I don't think politics or government is here to represent businesses. I think they're here to represent sovereign citizens, people who have a 14th Amendment right. And that's anyone who can claim to have a birth certificate, or anyone that has a green card or is a naturalized citizen in the United States. And the thing is, the reason why I know that we can allow partisan politics at the local level is because, and I'm only speaking for myself, I was targeted as a person, not at this level, but on the campaign trail. I was told that I wanted more homelessness, that I wanted more crime, and I was told that I wanted more taxes. That is 100% a political ploy that's being done by organized members that don't even belong to this community here in Bangor, that try to manipulate the council into representing their own interests. So it does exist, you are right, but it's not one-sided entity. It exists throughout. But again, I have to reiterate though, it is incredibly important to recognize the fact that all government is local, and government is not here to make sure that people's businesses go the way that they're supposed to. We're here to take care of people. We're here to protect citizens. That's my goal at the end of the day, and that's the ethos that I bring to this council.
I think there's a misunderstanding, if I may just correct what I mean by business. I mean that we as a council, when we take our oath, we say that we are looking at the city of Bangor like a tapestry of a harmonic community, and that our business is related to budgets and infrastructure and land use and codes for the betterment of all. We shouldn't be bringing the politics of, pro-ICE, anti-ICE, pro-immigration, anti-immigration. I think that's a part of the community fabric, that we have the multicultural committees and all kinds of different advisory committees. And if we get to the point where we need that advice, we should reach out and get it. But the last year, 2 years, or 5 years that I tried to research today, I didn't see that there was a lot of, inclusion for a lot of other communities. That we've done something with the LGBTQ for Pride Week and gone down, but we have other religions that I really haven't seen a whole lot of representation for. There's a lot of other groups. We have strong Korean, Vietnamese groups. It seems like we've been very targeted to a few, and it seems like we've spent a lot of time about immigration. We have 32,500 residents, and this is where I don't think, as a matter of fact, I think in our charter it says that we are not to direct our interest by having a particular certain individual or groups, whether we rally outside to try to influence council and council votes, whether economic or otherwise, which may accrue to such individual groups to result in a passage or denial of an order or ordinance. And we are doing that when every time we come up and we don't, 3 times we've had the immigration, we said we're inclusive. I was comfortable with the way we finally ended up agreeing that, because I felt that was inclusive. It was inclusive for our immigrants. It was inclusive for our LGBTQ plus community. To me, that was bringing our community together and letting everybody know. But when we are targeting out and saying, or we're going to riots and we're standing up against that, we're only speaking of a small portion of the city. We are creating divide, and we are adding to the chaos instead of coming to the table and just taking care of the business which we've been hired to do. Budgets, infrastructure, the personnel, the way our system flows here. We are here as business leaders, not to get in the mix of social agendas. That's when I meant business. I don't mean we should just look out for business. I think that us as intelligent leaders are here to do business. We have infrastructure issues. We have homeless issues. We have affordable housing issues. But, here we are debating. And when someone stands up here and continues to come back 3 times and going to come back again, I'm sure, with another immigration or ICE. Just last week, we had a bust of child pornography. There's certain things that we need to keep the criminals out of Bangor. And, when 6 students got shot up at Fort Kent, I don't think municipalities were all running around saying, we don't want Maine National Guard or the National Guard. We've got to focus on unity and inclusivity without it creating divides. In the past year, when we have the attitudes coming up to the podium from this group, it has been a lot of opposition, and a lot of people feel we're not paying attention. That 32,000 people being left behind because our interest and our compassion has been hijacked.
Councilor Flynn.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this committee about more than immigrants? And maybe that has been the topic lately, because that has been the topic nationwide. But on July 7th, 1984, in Bangor, Maine, one of the most heinous hate crimes happened right here in Bangor. And that is when Charlie Howard was killed, and we sort of became the poster child for for this like horrific crime against a member of the LGBTQ plus community. I think that is not something that we want to be known for. I think we want to be known for being welcoming. I will say also, as the mother of a special needs child in the Bangor school system. I have had to fight for his rights his entire life. And that is what inclusion is all about. And until you have had to fight for somebody like that for every little thing so that, you know, they can get what they are legally entitled to. And now we're in a time when those very things, DEI, which includes programs for special needs children, are under attack. These are all things that impact like much more than the immigrant community, but also we should be welcoming to the immigrant community because people are being ripped apart right here in the state of Maine when they are here legally. So for all of these reasons and all of these groups, we need to keep this group. We may not agree with one particular component of what this group is doing, but there are plenty of other groups and they, like I said, may not have been the focus like recently, but that doesn't mean that they haven't been or might not be in the future.
I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Fish. This is an advisory committee. So I assume an advisory committee is going, if we have an issue, we give it to them to give us advice. They seem to be running rampant any way they want without asking if that's the way we want to go. So, you know, I don't know why you call them an advisory committee when they stand up and chastise the council for not doing what they wanted them to do. Who are they advising on that? Are they advising the general public? I mean, I'm a little confused. When you look for advice from someone, you take it and decide what you want to do. You don't expect them to stand up there and say, you didn't follow my advice, therefore you people are not doing the right thing. That's not what giving advice is all about. Sometimes you like their advice, sometimes you don't. But it's our decision to make, it's not theirs. They work for the council and they seem to have forgotten that. So I'm in favor of eliminating it.
If I could just say, in regards to the advice, for example, the ICE ordinance, which comes up, they came to us on GovOps, we discussed it. They took advice at that time and they went back and they talked to chief, they talked to the city solicitor, and, you know, in my opinion, they watered down the resolve as a result of that feedback. And then they brought back, because again, they thought we wanted them to come back because we gave them the feedbacks and so they were acting under our direction. And I would say that, you know, looking at the ordinance that established them, you know, their mission is to develop ideas and information to educate individuals within the organization, Bangor, as well as the community, focusing on the topics of, but not limited to, awareness, sensitivity, equity, inclusion, and diversity. Check, they're doing that. Review and advise city staff regarding policies and practices to recruit, hire, onboard, promote, and retain a diverse and inclusive workforce. That's also part of their mission. But also specifically, their work is to mitigate the potential for bias in the hiring or retention decisions through consistent evidence-based tools, procedures, and trainings. But this is the part I think that, you know, tells them they don't have to wait for us. It says their job is to review applicable ordinances, policies, and programs to ensure that they promote the goal of accepting, respecting, and valuing differences, including attributes such as age, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation. I mean, the whole list there. And so I don't think it's a matter of they're doing not what we're telling them to do. I mean, that's what an advisory committee does. They come to us, they do give us advice. And you're right, we don't have to listen to it, and we haven't always. But I appreciate hearing it. I don't, yes, I got 75 emails supporting this committee, but I didn't need 75 emails to tell me how much to value their input. I have always valued it and I'll continue to value it. And I definitely do not support removing this committee, and certainly not now. These aren't political issues at all. You know, being afraid of ICE isn't because they're a Democrat. Being afraid of ICE isn't because they're an independent. You know, it's not an exclusive thing. You know, the fact that they are a protected class, that they are a vulnerable minority, that is why they're afraid, because they are being targeted. That's just facts, not politics. So I'm happy to hear these issues because they are the issues of the people we represent. And I will say this, if 32,000 people feel like they're not included, I believe we do have a committee that deals with inclusion. And I would recommend them to bring up their issues. You know, I want to make sure that everyone feels included. If that's a real thing, if we're not just throwing it out there to use an excuse to kill it, it is a real feeling of I don't feel included, please speak up. You know, let's hear. So I just want to put out there that I also am not in favor of removing this committee. Councilor Carson.
Yes, to be clear, I'm not on this committee, but I want to make a few comments. I'm supportive of the mission and the goals of the committee as stated in city code. I have a concern with the ordinance that we're discussing, the actual language of the ordinance in front of me, which hasn't come up yet. And the concern is that this suggests that the recent work of the committee in terms of discussions around housing and homelessness will overlap with the jurisdiction of the conversation we're about to have. And so I would expect that if that, that being true, the remedy really would be to redirect those conversations if we're to create the housing committee or whatever it's going to be called. So I just have that sort of issue with the actual order that is in front of me, because that seems to be an easy way to fix that. I'm supportive of the mission and the goals of the committee. I think it's important when we have discussions. I would love to hear, as we're talking about housing, I would love a committee to remind me that seniors often face discrimination as they go back into the workforce because of our deteriorating economic conditions, and that they also face discrimination in housing. I would love somebody to remind me about those things as we're talking about them. But then I have the question of jurisdiction, and so maybe this is where maybe somebody could help me to understand how this process works, the back and forth. When I read in the mission that it's to review applicable ordinances, policies, and programs to ensure, that to me suggests that the things being reviewed must already exist, right? Because an ordinance, a policy, or a program isn't just an idea. Those are things that are put on paper and passed, and so I just maybe want a little bit more understanding. I know the committee long predates my existence here in this space, so maybe if somebody who could provide that background to me about how that interplay works, how they take up their work, because I have that question. Thanks.
I actually might be able to answer that unless someone else wants to say something.
Maybe we could hear the ordinance.
Yep.
The one thing I would say is this just didn't fall out of the sky. There were people with concerns that came. The way the advisory committee is set up, it can be set up or taken away by the council chair. It does not have to go to a full meeting. That isn't what we wanted. We wanted a discussion. And so City Manager Lear was willing to draft something for us to bring here for discussion. This may not get decided tonight. This may have to hold to another, a workshop or something where other views that haven't been brought up is this was put together sort of quickly when the committee was formed. And I don't believe there were a lot of guidelines and who was responsible for what and when were they going to come back and report? What did we want in those reports? How often do we want those reports? I think it's becoming clear that some of our committees are, especially the advisory ones, are out there and kind of doing what they think they're supposed to be doing, but there really isn't a lot of accountability on either side. And that was what I discussed with the city manager is maybe we look at the ordinance and take it to the council and hear some discussion on it. There might be some revamping, and maybe at the end of the day, it might go away. But if it doesn't, it has to be in a better form than it is right now. That's what I was hearing from people that were coming. That's where it said repeal. repeal was kind of just to not give anything for a while, let things settle and see what we were gonna have for discussions. That's why we're sitting here with this. So with the chairs, if he would let you
Yeah.
introduce the ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. It's just a full repeal of the
Mhm.
committee. I think I did hear a question though, which was how does the work come to the committee? Counselor Carson, was that sort of what's sort of like the actual cadence of how issues get raised? And I think that there are probably a couple of people who could answer that question. Courtney staffs that committee and creates the agenda, so I think she could talk in a very practical sense about how issues come to the agenda. And then I think, of course, the longstanding chair of that committee could speak to sort of how they identify issues.
Yeah, please do.
So I actually started working for the city of Bangor a few months it was a few months after. It was put together in October 2020, but by the time the ordinance went through, it was approved and it was staffed, it was early 2021 when it actually got up off the ground. To the committee chair's point earlier, certainly it's been through a lot of changes and whatnot. And so currently what we do for the agenda is if the council were to refer an item through a committee to this, then it would be funneled through. Otherwise, I meet with the chair and the vice chair a week or two before the meeting to set the agenda. And oftentimes those items kind of roll over from meeting to meeting. And sometimes staff have different things such as the plan for CDBG, for example, has gone through the committee multiple times. And other items internally that staff kind of bring forward under the belief, I guess, of what the ordinance says for their consideration. So for example, when we were updating the website, we brought that before them a few different meetings to discuss. And so, yeah, I would just say that in general, the committee has acted with guidance from staff. And so if there is a different expectation from the council as to how you would like this committee to operate, that would be really best directed, I think, at staff, as we're the ones that give that guidance to the committee. And I will say that with a counselor liaison, that has alleviated that burden a little bit because it's a better bridge, I think. But certainly, you know, we are here to provide support and background and information that may be helpful.
Counselor Dean.
I'm still confused as to why it came out in an order and not in a discussion at a workshop. It seems like we all have a lot to say about this. And in my opinion, if there were issues with the advisory committee, we should be discussing what kind of changes we want, not disbanding an advisory committee that's been with us since 2020. Perhaps they have moved into a direction that people are not comfortable with, and that's worth a discussion. But to disband a very important advisory committee due to a few issues, in my opinion, is unfair. It should have been a workshop. The 287G, I feel badly because I believe I was the one that agreed that they should come back. And then when they came back, everyone was confused why they were back. So I think it was a miscommunication. We kind of were being nice. I think we weren't really comfortable with that at the time. But we didn't want to say no because we knew we should probably do something. And so we had them come back and it probably did concern a few people. And we ended up not approving it, which is what we have the right to do. I mean, there are a lot of different opinions, but I really have a problem with people who don't understand that there are people in this community who are persecuted because they are different. And unless you have a child who is transgender or gay or deaf or disabled, I don't think you can fully understand what they go through. So I don't think disbanding this committee is what we need to do. Restructuring, perhaps, but this order to me is not in our best interest.
Counselor Flynn.
I agree with all of that, but that's not what I wanted to say. I'd be interested in knowing, like, if we have a ballpark figure of who kind of was not or contacted us and had an issue with this committee, because we've gotten, as you've all seen, probably 75 to 100 emails and counting, because they're still coming in from people who are against disbanding this group. And just out of curiosity, is it a handful of people who wanted to disband it? Because if we're proposing disbanding it because of a handful of people, when we've got maybe 100 people saying don't do it, I think we need to weigh that as well.
Well, we do have a long night, and I want to make sure I get to Councilor Walker as well. But at some point, I do want, if we're going to entertain a motion on this one way or another, I mean, obviously the affirmative would have to be, or if we're just, tabling it for now, something. But please, Councilor Walker.
So as most of you know, this does kind of date before I became a council member, and so I'm still learning, and I will continue to say that until I can put these pieces together for myself. But I know that you had said, Chair, that you and the manager here had just had a discussion around it. And how did the community members know before the council meeting? Is kind of was one part of the question that I didn't know that, or even if that's we're supposed to know, I don't know. So I'm asking because I don't know. I also am curious about, you had said, Chair, that the chair has the right to end the committee without the council vote. That's new to me. I didn't know, and I wondered if we could talk a little bit more about that or have a different discussion, because I don't know about that and how it came about this. So I don't know, I feel kind of uncomfortable now, but I wanted to kind of put it out there that I didn't understand the process of that. I also am in agreement with Councilor Dean about what she had said. I back that up 100%. I do not agree with this. I think it's unfair. And I'm gonna end it there, sorry.
Yep.
I just want to talk a little bit about process. So any counselor can ask city staff to draft a order or resolve any materials for council consideration and request that it be placed on the agenda. And so that's sort of any idea that you all have, we would do that for you. We would take your direction, draft it to the best of our ability, and then assist in getting it on the agenda, which is what happened with this one.
I appreciate that. I also, just before I end real quick, is that I kind of felt like going into this and hearing about this and it being brought tonight for discussion, I didn't feel like at all before this that it was political. I do now feel like that. It's kind of an uncomfortable feeling because I felt like that we are all, we do want the best for the community, and we each all bring our own individual opinions and whatnot to the table. And I don't know, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I wanted to get that out there.
Sure. Did anyone want to speak to the other question that Councilor Walker had about, because my understanding is this is an ordinance and would require being repealed through an ordinance as it's written here, and I don't know of any other way it can be just unilaterally disbanded.
Yeah, I'm not off the top of my head. I don't have it in front of me. So I wasn't thinking about whether the council chair had authority to do that or not. I can't answer that. I would have to go look.
For clarity for all of us, it may be the city solicitor. As someone, I know he's not here tonight, but
Yeah.
at some future, maybe we could just make sure that
Sure.
we're all on the same page. We'd like to move on to the other issues. Does anyone want to make a motion regarding this item?
We make a motion to table it for, I don't think the community's had an opportunity. I know we got 35 to 70 emails, but I also think that those in favor of this got the heads up or got a network of communication that I think the other part of the community has not had the opportunity to weigh in on. So I think we need to make a better effort to communicate with the people at large out there. And even if they don't dare to come and speak at the podium, they know how to email us. And I don't know that they even know if this subject's come up. And there are probably a lot of them that you guys have heard of from and I've heard from. So I just don't think we're fairly hearing from a lot of people in the community that I think are compassionate, and they agree that after what happened to Shelley Howard, we've made him, we've tried to really bend over backwards to be inclusive. That's why we had that resolve to welcome everybody. And but I also think there's a lot of people that are feeling left out. I know our Jewish community has a lot of fear right now with the anti-Semitism. We've not seen anything coming out for them. So I think sometimes in our focus, and we're so passionate, I think sometimes we forget, and what we think is inclusive, unfortunately, sometimes is ironically making it more divisive. And I also had maybe a misconception that the council's job was to look at our charter, look at our HR, look at our ordinances, and to me, that was a task they've done and reviewed through it and made changes. So if their job is done, do we just have somebody on like an ethics committee where when we need them, we bring them up, and we have maybe a better rounded table of other experts that include other aspects of the community that do feel that way.
So is your motion to table till the next kebabs meeting?
Yes.
Can we not entertain a motion to reject it and have it?
Well, I can't do it in the negative. It'd have to be, someone have to move it in the affirmative and then. But the motion, I have the motion right now is to table it till the next kebabs meeting. Is there a second? There's a second. Is there a doubt? I'll do a roll call vote.
Don't, but I have a question.
I'm gonna doubt the
I'm gonna
motion.
doubt it.
Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote on this motion, and then you have a question about the motion, or?
Well, it depends on whether this, I just don't understand what tabling it will do. It's still here.
Hmm.
So if you doubt it, we have to vote on it.
Yeah, we have to, well, yeah, so we have to vote. So roll call vote, Counselor Fish. So this is for the table.
It's for tabling it, yes.
Counselor Matt.
Yes.
Counselor Dean.
I'm confused. If I table it, it comes back.
Yes,
If I don't table it, it does not come back.
it doesn't come back.
But
Well,
it comes back different.
we're still in possession of the item, and we have to
And then
decide.
we can vote on the item.
Well, we would have to have a motion to, and then vote. But yes, no motion would exist at that point. We're still in possession. What are we gonna do?
I vote not to table it.
Okay.
I vote no.
Dr. Walker, sorry.
I vote no.
And I'm a no, so we won't table it. Any other motions on this item?
I can motion to not dismantle it. Is that what
Well,
we're?
we can't,
No,
motion in
can't vote
the
it.
negative. So the motion isn't your vote, but you can motion to say, we move it to the full council. And then,
I would like to motion to move it to the full council.
do you have a second?
Second.
Okay, so motion and a second. Since we'll have doubt, I'll do a roll call vote. Counselor Fish,
Yes.
Counselor Malik,
Yeah.
Yes, you're just gonna move it to the council.
Counselor D.
I'm still confused.
Well, now the issue in front of us is whether or not to move this item to the full council.
No.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
okay, and I will be a no, so we have, what?
I think Council Walker might be confused.
She's got me confused now. I'm
Sorry,
confused.
sorry.
The motion was, the
Move it
motion
back
was,
to my vote,
are we
please,
moving
no.
this to the full council for
Yes, no.
consideration?
Thank you.
So again, Counselor Walker,
No.
okay, and I will be a no. So that's 2 yes, 3 no, so this will not move forward to full council. Let's move on to the next item then. Now on this item, there was an email that went out, I have a conflict of interest. Because that involved the Together Place Peer Run Recovery Center. And council previously voted that I do have a conflict. There was a instruction from the city solicitor on how to move the chair pro tem during this item while I'm out of the room. If somebody wanted to read that motion or make that motion.
Somebody on the committee.
What? I'm stupid.
Do I have to put a name in there?
Yep, you'll just make a motion to nominate somebody. I cannot vote on this motion.
Okay, I make a motion to nominate myself to stand in for Councilor Beck, who has a conflict with this particular item on the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any doubt? Okay, are we outside?
Right, so I believe we are discussing an order authorizing the city manager to execute a subcontract with Maine Mental Health Connections Together Place Peer Run Recovery Center to receive up to $50,000 from the state of Maine's Overdose Response Pilot Grant. And who will be discussing this?
I think that is Jen Gunderman, Public Health Director.
We'd see you sometime tonight.
Thank you, Jennifer Gunderman, Director of Bangor Public Health and Community Services. So a few weeks ago, you voted to approve us receiving the funds for the overdose response team. This in front of you now is to go into a subcontract with Together Place to actually employ one of the people that's part of that overdose response team. This is a contract that we've had for many years. This is one way that we work with our community partners who have expertise and staff who have skill to work in this area. So what we're just asking is that you consider approving that we enter into this contract to continue funding that overdose response team member.
Do we have any questions on the item? Oh, Counselor Fish.
We've had some discussion, and I know we probably can't resolve this here, but we've acquired a lot of grants and we've passed them out, and then we never really have any attachment to them for accountability, reporting back, how it's spent, how it's going. And, you know, after the women's shelter funds, we just dispersed. I have a great concern about general approvals when we don't see any fiscal reporting or accountability or just, you know, what's really being done, and we just pass them and they get the money. And I just would like to see a little more accountability and reporting so we know what's really being done and what was done.
I respond to that. Our funding in our department comes with very strict reporting requirements because our funding sources is the state, which we go through contractor management. There are very strict requirements on both fiscal reporting and programmatic reporting. So the funding that we're providing here in this grant is with Maine Department of Health and Human Services, and we'll be meeting those reporting requirements. We also require our subcontractors to do that reporting to us. With this grant specifically, this funding also supports an overdose response coordinator, which is a staff person who actually sits in our department to make sure that there's oversight and accountability. So the funding that comes out of our department has very strict reporting requirements to it.
Okay, thank you for answering that. So this 50,000 or resolves or action orders similar to this, if they're coming through your department, you guys are overseeing and accountability.
Absolutely, and because it's linked to our funding sources that require that.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Miller.
If that's the case, we should be able to see a report that you've had in the past.
Absolutely, I can provide
I
any
think we should.
reports for
It
any
would
of our
ease
funding
everyone's
sources.
pain.
For this project
Right.
specifically?
Yes.
Any other questions?
I do.
Yes, Counselor
Will we
Walker.
get more updates from Together Place in regards to the funding? Up to $50,000 for, is this the options that's gonna be in your office that will go to Together Place?
No, this is an actual staff person at Together Place.
So the funding is for a staff member for Together Place through your.
Yeah, so we get the funding and then we subcontract with Together Place for one of those options teams members. So that $50,000 goes towards some of their staff time, some of the oversight staff time. I'm not quite sure if there's indirect in this subcontract.
Is this person full-time or part-time?
This is, I believe, a full-time person, but I can get back on what often happens is we will provide a contract to an organization for X amount of money to pay for so many hours or so much time. And sometimes what happens with organizations is they use funding from another source to then make a full-time position. So I will check to see if with $50,000, I don't believe this is funding the full one FTE. I believe this is part of a time, and then Together Place finds funding from another source to fill in if they want to make that a full FTE position.
Any other questions? I entertain a motion.
Lost my agenda, but I make a motion to move the order.
Second,
A second.
we have a motion, we have a second. Will this go to full council? So this will be seen next week, full council on Monday, February 9th.
You want to stay?
We'll be joined by Councilor Beck.
Thank you.
Turn this back over to Councilor Beck. Yes. Freedom to post.
Thank you. So I believe that brings us up to the public health update. And the public health director.
Right there.
Yeah, please take it away.
Sure. So thank you for letting me provide this update for you today. And please let me know with these updates if you have any other questions or any other things you want me to bring to you. I'll start off with the HIV hepatitis C outbreak. There is an update from when this memo went out. As of 1/26, the Maine CDC is reporting 36 cases. So we have had another case since this memo was written. That equals about 58% of the cases were reported just in 2025. This outbreak timeline, CDC is saying, starts about October 2023, with one case reported at the end of 2023. We can see that we're still seeing more cases. So the US CDC team, the federal CDC team, was here in Bangor for about 2 weeks. They did a few different things. First, they did qualitative interviews with people in the impacted population. So it's people who are part of the outbreak, people who are not part of the outbreak, but are at risk for transmission. They made a lot of observations about how we're doing our work on the ground. And then they also did some education while they were here. So some of their key takeaways include that reducing stigma is a critical part of this work, particularly in the interviews. There was a mention that people are seeking care based upon where they feel the least amount of stigma. And the good news is that there are places that they can receive care as part of this outbreak response that they don't feel that stigma. But we can be doing more in terms of breaking down that barrier. They also mentioned that there are opportunities for improving system efficiency, such as getting a blood drawn done when there's an HIV test done, and also some efficiency around the PrEP or the pre-exposure prophylaxis programs. And then also another key takeaway was including hepatitis C strategies. We've talked a lot about HIV, but hepatitis C is getting a little bit lost in that. They did highlight, I just want to say, the benefits of our case management program. They said that it was reaching people, that it was engaging people. People had reported in those interviews that that was a positive, as well as many other of our partners' activities. So as a result, the Bangor Public Health and Department has started to think about what we can do a little bit better. So a couple of things that we're doing is that we are revamping our self-testing program. We've given out over 150 self-tests in Bangor. That is one strategy for people who don't want to go and get tested in a clinic or an outreach setting. We have designed educational materials around it, but we're doing some revamping of that program so that it's just, there's a little bit more information and education about self-testing. We are hoping to planning an expansion of our clinical services. One of the things that seemed as a big barrier is the blood draw. So people would go to get tested in a non-clinic setting and they get what's called a rapid, just like a finger prick. It's an antibody test. Antibodies take 3 to 6 months to develop. When someone tests positive, it's really important that they get an actual venous blood draw There's barriers to that in some of our outreach settings. So we've been working with our public health nurses, have reached out to PCHC to help us be able to do those blood draws, to be able to get that confirmation testing done. That will be sort of help to break down some of those barriers. And then again, in supporting increased testing and education. So I've already reached out to the methadone clinics, to the warming centers, to a few other partners to see how we can expand testing. We are trying to work smarter, not harder, meaning what we know is that we have very limited resources in this area. We do not get any additional funding at our department to do this work. So we are trying to do the work with the funding that we have. And what we really need to do is do the things that have the best return on investment. So there are some things that we're just not able to do at our department, because what we do is we say, what does the evidence say that's most effective? Sort of that high impact, low resource kind of grid. And I can go into that, but I do want to also share with you that if anyone's ever interested, we have these handy dandy resource cards that list all the resources for prevention, treatment, and care. This is also available on our website. One other thing. Any questions about outbreak response?
Any questions for the director on that?
The one other thing that I would mention is we've been in contact with a number of agencies and entities that have reached out to us that are national organizations to help guide us in our strategies. Not only USCDC has provided us with input, but we've spoken with, just throw out the acronyms, NASDAD, NACCHO, and we even have someone from the Rhode Island Department of Public Health who's coming up to look at how operations are happening here to provide us with some guidance. Next update is around syringe service programs. I know there's been some questions about how syringe service programs come to be in Bangor. An entity that wants to be an SSP puts an application in to the Maine CDC. The Maine CDC reviews that application. They have a review committee that's made up of a number of people, and they have about 30 days to approve or not approve an application. Once they approve an application, that's when we're informed. We are not informed or have any role in an SSP approval. We just get notified at the end. So first of all, I just want to clarify, that's what happens. One of the reasons why the city got involved, say with Needle Point Sanctuary's application, was because once we received notice that they had been approved for the Ohio Street location, that's when we learned that wasn't an area that was zoned. Because we never knew up front, we couldn't address that issue up front. So I just want to clarify, because there's some confusion on like when we actually get involved. There are 3 brick and mortar SSPs. Wabanaki Public Health and Wellness over on Hancock Street. Needle Point Sanctuary has 2 now brick and mortar sites. There's the Ohio Street location, which is on, I believe it's Thursday, Fridays, Saturdays. And then they've just been approved for the UU Church on Mondays and Tuesdays. That's the only Maine CDC approved SSPs in the city of Bangor. Last legislative session, a new bill was passed and the rules are being developed right now that will change what SSP services will look like across the state. One of the first changes that will be made is that when an SSP gets certified the first time around, they will be certified and they will be able to operate within an operational area. So what happens is right now, if an SSP wants to have another location or a mobile site, they have to inform the CDC, get approval, and it goes through a process. Now, once an SSP is approved in a municipality, they can go wherever they want, as long as it meets the city's zoning and other ordinances. So that's a significant change that you should be aware of. The other change that's being made is that SSPs will be able to do delivery of syringes. That's a different mode of providing syringes and all the other SSP services. That's different. And then the other part of the ordinance, I believe, there's some other dirty details about application, but the other part of the rules will be that an SSP can't be within, I believe it's 1,000 feet of a school. I think that's now being written in. I also just want to
let you know that SSP services are more than needle exchange. They're also education, referrals, collecting needles, and HIV hepatitis C testing. That's like the full package of SSP services.
Yeah, Council Floyd.
Thank you. The needle collection, like, is that a requirement they have to turn in, like, at all of these locations, that they have to turn needles in order to get new ones?
No, so yes and no. The way that the rules are written, SSPs must receive needles. So if I was an injection drug user and I had a box of needles and I was a consumer at an SSP, I can bring in my box of needles and say, I'm bringing these to you. There's a little bit of a policy. So it used to, in the state of Maine, it used to be 1 for 1. You bring in a needle, you get a needle. That changed over COVID. And basically what can happen is a person can receive, I believe it's like up to 100 needles at a time. The evidence-based way of doing needle exchange is what's called needs-based, where you have a conversation with someone and say, how many needles do you use a day? When's the next time you can get back here? Let's do the math. And that's as many needles as I'll give you. And I'll expect you to bring as many of those back to me. That's kind of the evidence-based way of doing SSPs. But it's not a 1 for 1.
Yep. Council B.
I have a question regarding the distance from, you said 1,000 yards from a school?
No,
1,000
1,000 feet of school
1,000
property.
feet from a school property, but there are no restrictions as to how far from a residential property.
Correct. That would come down to the municipality's ordinancing and zoning.
And so because Bangor had the zoning on Ohio Street, which was residential, and Park Street, which is more commercial, that's why it's allowed there.
Yes.
John Maps, less than 1,000 feet from you.
Please, no, let's leave it to the table here.
Would the UU be in compliance with the 1,000 feet from John Bax?
I will have to take a look at it. These new rules have not been put into place yet.
Question from that. Please continue. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Fish. I
No,
didn't see it.
I'm sorry, Pierre. I understand the need and importance of the SSP program. But at the same time, sometimes the municipality or business owners are taken by surprise when they suddenly find there's one near them, or we as a city get surprised. Is there, I don't know who this question should be directed to, but should we be looking at our ordinances to make sure that the amount of SSPs are somehow controlled, so they're just not popping up all over the place and we lose control over, what's going on, or the community at large gets blindsided? So how would we find out? Because right now we don't, like you said, the permits come from CDC, and then we just find out later, oh, yeah, they are. So what can we do to just make sure? I know we had an issue, I think Council Leonard, you were here a couple of years ago when they, Council Hawes, am I correct, when they just showed up, or they were gonna show up, and a lot of, it was gonna be downtown and next to businesses during business hours. And we were scrambling, the former manager at the time was scrambling to try to make some quick amends, and that just wish there was a better process and we had better input and better communication and more heads up.
Yes. One of the things that it's no surprise that I've been sort of frustrated with is that we just hear about things at the end, right? And so we can't engage in conversations in the beginning. And one of the things that I have sort of advocated for with Maine CDC is to bring the SSPs in our area together to talk about what does access to needles look like and where are the gaps, like to have a real strategy around it. So we've been in conversations with a national partner who might help us be able to have that kind of facilitated conversation. How you want to deal with the ordinances, and that might be a future conversation, and I would want to bring the SSPs in for that conversation. The one thing that I've sort of included here that could be a consideration is that Bangor Public Health become an SSP. that could allow us the ability to fill gaps in a way where we have a little bit more control over. And so not a decision to be made today, but I just want to kind of entertain that as these rule changes are happening. It will be interesting to see, for example, the delivery sort of mode, you know, that seems promising to me as a potential strategy. For a bunch of different reasons around foot traffic, and you know, we want to kind of coexist together, and we want as much as the community be content with a really effective strategy. So I just throw that out there.
Counselor Carson, then Counselor Flynn.
Yes, thank you, Director Gunderman. I wonder of the current SSPs, in your assessment, if you can, are the SSPs following an evidence-based model of exchange, or are the ones that are active here using the law as their guideline?
Yeah, what I can say is that we have actually been in Wabanaki's space to learn about SSPs and how an SSP is done, and our case managers there. And so I can say from our personal experience, we've learned a lot, and we can say that, you know, Wabanaki is doing everything that they need to do. We don't have the same experience with Needle Point Sanctuary, so I can't speak to that. Really, the oversight of SSPs is on behalf of Maine CDC. So I think if there's any questions, that could be a conversation for Maine CDC. I also know that Maine CDC is present with the Needle Point Sanctuary activity, so I would think that if anything came up, we would.
Counselor Flynn.
Thank you. I have a question and then just like a comment, if I may. So if the city were to start one, is it because we need, like we're not meeting the need, or we just need more flexibility and more locations and more different types of services?
You know, I can't, let me put it this way, in question, is there a need? That is where I've been advocating for a conversation with SSPs to understand where the gaps are. We don't have a good sense right now where the gaps are. We know that we have an ongoing outbreak. We know that access to clean needles is an important strategy. I can't tell you today where there's a gap. So that this proposal for us to potentially entertain that is for us to have the flexibility and the adaptability that's within sort of our public health oversight.
And just a comment or a tidbit of information that you may already be aware of it, but others at this table may not be, but in having a conversation with someone connected to the substance use disorder community, different people feel differently about the different centers, or you know, whatever you call them.
Yep.
Yeah, because some of the folks running them, they've built more of a trust with, because they have more of that lived experience, whereas some of the other centers don't have as much of that sort of lived experience, and that sort of determines which one they're going to go to. So it's not necessarily like that there's not enough, but maybe not enough of the type that that person is looking for, because they don't have that trust at this place, but they do over here.
I think there's a lot of factors, and that's one of them. I do know that location
Yeah.
is a big part of this. And say, for example, when the train track encampment was there, because it was close to Wabanaki, there was a lot of traffic over to Wabanaki because it was close. And so location can play a significant factor. Co-location of services is another big factor. If someone can go to an SSP and also get these other things, that breaks down a barrier for people needing to go to multiple locations. So there's many factors. That peer-to-peer model is absolutely part of that. And I think, you know, what we also have to remember is that there's not just one type of person who uses drugs, right? There are many different types of people living in many different situations who access in different ways.
Any other question before we move on? The next part.
So if we wanted to pursue that, that would come back as another conversation and in order, but I just wanted to kind of put that out there, particularly as we're waiting for those rules to be, I think, promulgated is the word. I think that's supposed to happen potentially this month. Federal funding, I just want to give you a couple of quick updates. The Maine Continuum of Care Rental Assistance Program, we were all very nervous about this NOFO. It looked like it was going to cut our permanent supportive housing by 70%. The courts got involved, and our second year of funding is actually going to remain the same. So for this year, that NOFO will come out in later 2026 for the next 2027. That's where we anticipate some big changes. So not always bad news, right? I got some good news. We're going to get that funding for the second year. I do want to let you know that the SAMHSA situation that happened on 114, as some people may have been aware, SAMHSA, the federal government, cut funding sort of immediately on January 14th for a number of programs. We would have lost staff and programming if that would have happened. By the end of the day, there was bipartisan support to get those programs back up and running. So we did not we did not have to make those cuts. Update on our maternal health, public health nursing program. I came to you at some point, I think it was back in the summer, about the contract that was, we had been doing public health nurse home visits for many, many years. That funding wasn't going to happen from Maine CDC. And we needed to kind of change our work. I just want to give you a quick update that our public health nurses have been focusing on lactation and maternal mental health. They have now launched a lactation clinic. So anybody from Bangor, regardless of socioeconomic status, can come right now and get free lactation support from our 2 public health nurses who have the sort of very impressive credentials and licensure to be able to do that. We've also started to explore a billing process for lactation services for those that have insurance. And then we're also running, continuing to do our maternal mental health. All right, warming centers. The good news is I am requiring them to report. So they report to me financial and programmatic reports. They did their first one in January for November and December, and they'll do it every month after. I received financial and program reports from both of those warming centers. And so I just want to provide you with a little bit of information here from those reports. So Mansion, we don't fund, but I just want to let you know they're averaging about 18 people a night. However, those numbers just jumped up last week to, this weekend on both Saturday and Sunday, they had 29 people. The Brick Church, which is one of the ones that we funded, according to their report, they have served between middle of November to the end of December, 129 unique individuals were served. There was about 1,728 bed stays, and they averaged about 36 individuals a night. Together Place had 312 unique individuals served from that time period, representing about 1,225 bed stays at averaging about 36 a night. So when I looked at what they had spent so far, between November and December, there were close to 3,000 bed stays. Together, accumulatively, they spent about $31,156, which equals about $11 a bed a night from city dollars. So I think the last time we talked about how do we spend a little bit and get a good return on our investment, I think this might be showing us something. Challenges, they're seeing people with very complex needs. And this goes into the positives. What I've witnessed, which has been really amazing, is the collaboration among the 3 warming centers. So if somebody isn't able to go to one warming center because of behavioral issues, they work to see where they can go to another warming shelter. But there's a lot of people with complex needs. Particularly for Together Place that is new and their volunteers are new, having the consistent volunteers is a challenge, particularly during flu and COVID season. And then transportation. The buses route is done at 5 and there's nothing on the weekend. So Bruce Hughes did transportation on that really cold night and he was very busy. Other positives, that collaboration. And then one of the things that the warming shelters is what I think Together Place put in their report and phrased it really well, was an active engagement site. It is a place where all these collaborative partners can come and reach their clients, engage with new clients, provide ongoing services. The Well, which is the day space that many of you visited, they're averaging about 60 to 70 people a day. And Needle Point Sanctuary U Church hosted a warming shelter on 124 due to the extreme cold. And then what I provided there was just a quote from the Together Places report that I think really captures some of the work.
Thank you. Do you get any information from Manna? I know they do some like warming and they do a meal, like
No, I don't have any. They don't do overnight. And I don't believe they do a day space. They do the food, I think, distribution, and I don't get any.
I think they do just a few hours of warming, like around the meal time,
But I can check, the Hub 7 coordinator helps with the nightly data week. I get data from Jen 2 to 3 times a week. I can reach out to her, see if she gets any data from Anna.
Any other questions? Do you have anything else for us?
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is another ordinance. This one would amend the code of the city of Bangor to create a standing legislative committee. Joining us at the table is City Manager Ware.
Yes, so I think this one's pretty straightforward. It's just adding to the council's standing committee roster, the committee that we discussed in the goal setting session, and then again subsequent to the meeting with our legislative delegation. It is a legislative committee. It would be the 6th council committee, and it would meet at the call of the chair to consider all items related to, or all items of interest happening at the state level to Bangor, liaise with the legislative delegation, and potentially seek sponsorship of legislation that's in the city's interest.
Questions on this item? Council one.
Committee, but this committee's been a long time coming. This has been immeasurably needed for Bangor. Augusta's never gonna come to Bangor, so we have to go to Augusta. I mean, I have nothing else to say, but like, please, committee, vote for this.
Councilor Bloom.
I would just make a suggestion that if we approve this committee, that maybe it meets on a different night, because some nights already what we have on the agenda has us here for a very long time. Just a thought.
I'll just add, I guess the only suggestion I would make as far as changes go is making sure there's a mechanism for how to give things to the committee. Being that it's just a subset of us, being 3 to 5, I want to make sure that, you know, we're all, at least 5 of us are in agreement that this is what they should be talking to our legislators about. This is what, you know, we're, just to make sure we're not into an accidental situation where they only have a quorum of 3 one night and those 3 decided that this is what we're going to talk to our legislators about. I got a question.
Yeah, also not on the committee, but excited about this idea. I think it would be important that this committee is that the guidance that this committee would receive would be based on council priorities. That it really should not be stepping outside of the already the will of the council. And the second thought I have is that in addition to the legislators, I think it would be great if this committee could maybe invite, maybe as non-voting members, but folks from the Penobscot County government, the tribal government, you know, others that are around here. So I'm sure there's priorities that, you know, that the council has that also extend to those, especially thinking about budgets.
Any other questions? So for this, are we looking for a motion to move forward or to amend it with the changes or?
Yeah, we would need one of the two, so specifically, what changes would you envision? Specifically mentioning other sorry, my words are just jumbled. Other bodies, elected bodies.
Yeah, and the only suggestion I would offer, again, is just making sure that how it's worded is, 5 of the 9 of us are, I know the priorities are one thing, but, for example, the rental registry, if we just say, well, a priority with housing, that would help housing. Well, there may not be 5 of the 9 who agree with that, the vehicle. So I just want to make sure that we're not, giving the city's blessing on legislation if there's not 5 of the 9 of the council who wants to proceed forward with something like that.
So I would envision it operating very similar to how all of the other standing committees operate, being that the 5 would be making a recommendation to council, but because this is policy stuff, it wouldn't require a council order. Maybe it would just be a workshop where we would agenda the committee's recommendation for full consideration by all 9. So I can try somehow to incorporate that concept into the draft ordinance.
Councilor.
To actually piggyback off of that, you took the words right out of my mouth. If every committee could be hypothetically a workshop, we have right now a downtown parking committee, which is very unique to our committees, where we have a counselor who is a chair of that committee that oversees volunteer members of the committee to make recommendations that we send to council. I am actually completely okay with the idea of having such a committee that is chaired by a counselor that has a hybrid of committee members that make those workshop oriented recommendations to council. If that helps us get to maybe a better strategy or idea of how we want to set up our relationships with Augusta, maybe that's not the agenda that we want to go forward with, and that's fine. That's completely okay. But because of the ability for us to be a bit more creative with this committee, we could also be a bit more creative with the way that it's organized as well. Completely side note, we are going to start to actually bring forward an ordinance to undo that parking committee requirement for a counselor to be the chair, just because it is rather ridiculous. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
Well, I would just say that is, I like the idea that it's council that's gonna be on this, and then I do like the idea that, we can, as at the council's behest, or the committee's behest rather, invite out, hey, we would like to have the county involved with some neighboring communities if it makes sense to whatever piece of legislation. Yeah, so I'm there. Any other comments on this?
So to keep this moving, do we want to vote on the concept with those changes, and I can bring them to council workshop on Monday? So it can at least get on the, and have it on the agenda. So if you're okay with the changes, you can vote on it. If not, you can always pull it.
Yeah, I'll entertain a motion that we proceed with that.
So I make a motion that we approve the ordinance that will be amended on Monday for our Monday council.
Second.
Any doubt? Seeing none? That sounds like a plan. All right. Now we're on to the ordinance amending the code of the city of Bangor to create a standing committee on homelessness and affordable housing. And just before we begin, I just, this sheet that I passed out everybody, they were just, when it's my turn to speak, I was going to talk about either changes that I have recommended that I wanted to get feedback on. So that's where that's at. But I wanted to hear from others first on your ideas on what we received in our packets.
Would it be helpful if I just gave like 30 seconds on history? Because we talked about this, I want to say maybe 2 months ago now.
Yes.
Because we were having all of those discussions about the railroad. And we had a very, very long meeting where at the very end, after a very long day, we looked at a draft committee on homelessness. And then Councilor Beck also had a draft of a standing committee on housing. And if I might add some color, we had some very vague direction to sort of combine those 2 concepts. And so what you have before you that I drafted is a 15-member standing committee that attempts to marry those two concepts, which admittedly was a challenge. And so that's sort of the history of why you have an advisory committee on homelessness and affordable housing before you. There was sort of a city staff draft, a Councilor Beck housing committee draft, and a maybe inartful attempt to combine them. I'm happy, the membership, sort of the 15 members is almost entirely, if not entirely, what city staff proposed. There weren't changes to that. But the sort of scope of the committee itself was borrowed very heavily from portions of Councilor Beck's draft.
Would it be helpful if we went through it kind of section by section, you know, rather than trying to talk about the whole big document? If we just kind of went through it and talked about, you know, starting with 2347 and get feedback that way. I'm happy for ideas on how to best get the most out of this. Seeing no objection.
I would love a section by section, just because, yeah, it's much easier for me personally.
Sure. Well, I mean, starting with, you know, 2347, you know, the preamble talking about why we have this. You know, any thoughts from anyone else? So the document I passed out with, you know, the red is just some thoughts I had. I guess just starting at the top, I did the line out and talked about changing the name of the housing board. My thinking was just because of the momentous task we're asking of them, you know, that just like we have a planning board, you know, this to me, the change it to instead of an advisory committee, is it really talking about all housing, not just going to be affordable housing. It's not just going to be homelessness, you know, because we got the missing middle to deal with. I mean, we'll take all kinds of housing. My thought was if we were to change this to a housing board, it's just all encompassing. And it's very clear to the people of Bangor that this is what it does. It is about housing in all forms, not just for low income, not just for the missing middle, not just for, you know, it's all housing. You know, obviously there's some emphasis there, but that was my thinking on that. And then I changed, and this is my thinking too, because again, I know that we've got two schools of thought. There's some who say we want to just spend the first 12 months studying the studies and coming up with that plan. I changed the preamble or that 2347 to talk about, you know, we know what to do. You know, we studied the issue. We accepted a $75,000 study last February that gave us ideas. So I'm worried about us being stuck in another year of studies as opposed to, you know, getting this board together to actually start taking some meaningful action and pull together what we've got. So that's what my changes speak to, is kind of changing that a little bit from the first half of the strategic plan to, yes, we'll look it over, but you know, we need housing production goals, and we need you know, to operationalize our homeless response initiatives, et cetera, to get out of talk shop and into action is what my proposal is. But I'm definitely open to feedback and hearing what other people think and how I see this going. Not for me.
Well, I'm definitely for a discussion about the best manner to bring this forward. However, I don't want to spend months and months discussing how we're going to devise this committee or board so that there's no action taking. The main goal was to find something to do with poor unhoused during the winter, and they're still unhoused. So, but I would certainly entertain some changes if we all think that is best interest. I kind of wish we had a little time to mull it over prior to making a decision tonight.
Okay, thank you.
I too, I've looked at this and even though it is housing, there's a great deal of this that is focused on the unhoused and on the members. You know, we have a really strong realtor group that are very have a lot of expertise with housing. And there's a lot of talent right here in Bangor that have grassroots experience in working with people that need lower income and affordable housing. And I really don't specifically see reaching out and working with them to have a great deal of statistical information and have certain designations where they have a superior expertise with working with HUD, Mainstay Housing, and a lot of others. So I just wish that they could be more involved. We have a great deal of developers here who put in a lot of affordable, trying to make affordable apartments. We have the Greater Bengal, the Boma, Landlord Association. So I think that they will be key in providing, not just from a report that we've done, for 75,000, but this would be real live Bangor talent. And I think they just include them.
I mean, to that point, and I'll put this out to everybody too, is that's a fair point. I mean, we just received this on Friday, and then now I have to drop this whole thing on you today with my thoughts. I mean, would the community, and I know we don't want to wait forever, you know, this is in the interest of making sure we're being as thorough as possible. Do we want to table this until another committee to give everyone time to absorb all of this and form their own feedback and opinion and then come back to it? Councilor Leonard.
Do we think as a council that we can read through all this, have our notes together so that by the time we come to Monday, if we were to have a special workshop to discuss this item, could we then just make that decision then to actually put it forward? Because I'm actually with Councilor Dean in that we do need to get the ball rolling on this as soon as possible. And regardless if we reject everything that you said or we accept all your amendments, I do think time is of the essence. And I would actually really appreciate if council, I get if people do feel hesitant and you do need more time, I get that, but I really do think we need to move this forward as soon as possible.
If I may.
Please, yes.
Excuse me, because this would require council action, you could have a special GovOps meeting on the 16th and take action on the 23rd. You could, of course, also have a conversation on Monday as well, but of course it wouldn't be, we wouldn't know the details to have it on that agenda anyway. So you're really looking at this point of January or February 23rd anyway. So you could, both of those dates could potentially be an option depending on how much time you wanted to give folks.
Thank you for that clarification.
Oh, sorry, Councilor.
Yeah, again, not on the committee, but I personally would like more time to read because I struggle with lines, colors, there's a lot going on here. I wonder just because these are your thoughts, right, that you've put
Yeah,
down.
these are just my thoughts. So I would, yeah.
Just regarding the last thing we just did, I noticed in your thoughts here, you put, the board's duties, one of those things is state legislative advocacy. Do you see that as a complement to what we just did, or do you see that as now potentially a duplication of efforts?
It's gonna have to be a compliment because this board's gonna talk about what they think it should be, but it should, if it's gonna require us as a council to get on board, then it certainly could be referred to that. Because again, this is the outside of council action, so they're gonna have their own thoughts of what works for housing policy, but they certainly should take advantage of this new committee if we decide to create it. Councilor Fish.
And to piggyback on that, again, MAR, Maine Association of Realtors, and the local board has a legislative committee, and that's their watchdogs for anything to do with housing. So again, maybe we can implement that to work with them, especially when we need to apply some more pressure to team up or piggyback with them for housing issues.
So if we can, with the pleasure of the committee, do we want to take advantage of doing a special government operations committee on the 16th, I believe, this is Major said. So we all have time to kind of absorb this. And again, this is not any kind of emotion or anything, your thoughts, what I think. So don't feel obligated to say, oh, well, this or that. I mean, I'm hoping that we can all come together on what, we can pick from both and come up with the best possible answer.
Also, I have to correct myself, the 16th is President's Day, so it would be Wednesday. The 18th, yes, thank you. So the timeline gets further and
Oh,
further.
so I think George Washington was mine, but so that's an option. I mean, how does the council or the committee rather feel about that? About taking the time to read through now what we received on Friday, what I've added, your own thoughts, and let's come back to this on the 18th. And we work through this.
Sure.
Any objection? That sounds like what we'll do then. Which that brings us to the last item. An order authorizing an update to the public use of city hall property. You may go in. Or.
Oh.
Well, I mean, Courtney was the brilliance behind this, so.
Yeah, so some of you may remember in the past, actually, different organizations used to use city council chambers up on the 3rd floor for different purposes. And so the policy that's before you was actually amended. It was approved back in 1997. And so the pieces that changed most frequently is rather than offer up this room, given all the AV and everything associated with it. In fact, the renovation was done with the Paul Bunyan room down at the end of the hall, actually, with the intent of that being available under this policy for the use by nonprofits, civic organization, and other governmental entities. And there's a list of what that priority looks like. There has been a longstanding charge of $25 for use per hour. We are recommending that it be $50 for after hours use, as we have to have staff to make sure that everything is good and access is available. It would also add language around the approval process and what that looks like in requiring that they basically sign off on an agreement around making sure that from liability perspective, if something is damaged or anything like that, that there's insurance coverage for that. It also addresses the reasons why they may be denied use of the room. That could include lack of staff, scheduling conflict, and any other reason that is made in good faith in terms of why that room cannot be made available. This is really not meant to accommodate reoccurring regular meetings, but rather like one-offs for folks that need a space and unable to find it elsewhere for that purpose. And of course, this also, the city clerk, Goodwin, actually brought to my attention, she wanted it to clarify or recommend that also weddings that are being performed by her office be explicitly allowed under this policy, as well as that could be considered a gathering. This policy also addresses things like posters and things like that, publications by outside entities. As you can see, we have brand new space, we have limited posting areas, and so we're just recommending that rather than trying to police that no outside entity be allowed to post inside City Hall, that be reserved for city business and school business, of course, as well. And so other than that, the policy really is only for use here on the 1st floor, just because everything is kind of locked down, but they would still have access to bathrooms as opposed to the 2nd and 3rd floor, which is at this point reserved more for staff than outside use. So that's sort of the gist of this. And as you can see, it's been a long time since it's been updated. And this was prompted by the renovation and some interest in relooking at this, which we politely declined until this policy could be updated just to make sure that the city needs.
Question for the Assistant City Manager. Councilor Carson and then Councilor Flynn.
2 questions. The first is just out of pure curiosity, what is the historical frequency that people make these kinds of requests? And then the second one is about the fee structure. I'm familiar with other spaces of comparable size in the area, and 25 seems a little light for the available technology and what's offered in this space. And so I'm wondering if there's some thought about, or the thinking about that structure.
Sure, so for our organizations like the Bangor Water District have used our space for meetings, EMDC, other nonprofit organizations as well. It's not a lot. I think since we've been back in this building, I think I've received 2, I believe, requests. Because folks have known that in the past we have offered that, and so they have reached out. As for the fee structure, I mean, the $25 is what it was before, and I think the intent was always to kind of offer a space to those specific entities, understanding that they generally provide a benefit to the citizens of Bangor. And by switching that $25 to being during business hours, it's pretty minimal in terms of staff time and resources for that. Really, the burden is in the evening because of access to the building and any potential additional cleaning that may need to occur after. So yeah, that was where we started. And certainly if the council would like more information or for us to address that differently, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, I think the idea is just to cover costs.
Yeah.
So that I'm sure other places are maybe thinking about revenue generation, which isn't our goal.
Councilor Flynn.
Thank you. When I looked at this, the first thing I thought of when I looked at section 4.0, City Hall steps and porch area, were protests, which are not specifically addressed in here, but that was a use that immediately popped into my head, and it has happened not too long ago while we were all in here, that there was one taking place out front. So my understanding is that for somebody to do that out front, they would actually need a permit from the police department, correct?
So the city event permit policy does address gatherings, but I believe that's of 30 people or more. And so you'll note that in here it says that use of the steps and the porch is generally discouraged. That is the language that has been in this policy since 1997. The only thing we added was that it would come to this committee as opposed to some other committee by the council. And I think we have historically discouraged it. When they just pop up without us knowing is when it's kind of gray area. Normally when that happens, they come and go fairly quickly, or it's after hours. And so nobody is accessing this building anymore. But I personally know that in the past we have dispersed groups that have gathered on the steps for the reason that either they didn't have a permit or they're obstructing access to the building for services and things like that.
Yeah, I guess I was just, wondering if maybe that should be addressed in here just to make it clear, but just a thought. Thanks.
Other questions? I did have one question. You talked about the other areas of City Hall, which I'm assuming regard this room. How does it apply with like the League of Women Voters when they do their forums? How is that decided they're given access, or how does that work?
So that's actually a fantastic question, one I had not thought of, but I have a reason and an explanation. So that is because that event, if you will, has historically been viewed as like a direct benefit to the citizens and has been historically recorded and actually live streamed through city avenues. In the past it was Facebook, now it's YouTube. And so I think that provided that the council wasn't opposed, I think that may be something that was continued to be allowed, as it's in a way sponsored, if you will, to a degree, in that it has to do specifically with city council candidates and school committee candidates, which of course supports what we do. The intent was really to make sure that like outside groups trying to use all this AV wouldn't actually, one, create issues for when we have to come back in here and use it, but also to staff it for the AV purposes. When the Paul Bunyan Room, for example, it's like a 3-minute tutorial and they are able to use that smart board. But I can't think of another organization anyway off the top of my head that we would actually live stream for or anything like that. And of course that sort of event, because us as staff should be, you know, bipartisan and everything about who is running. We don't have any sort of role in that. So it's actually a nice thing that a third party runs that specific forum.
Sure, sure. And just to be clear, no objection on my part or anything. I guess I was asking from the angle of, at some point, again, I don't think anyone ever has, but at some point, some other organization might move forward and say, oh, we want to have a forum for CD2 candidates, or we want to have this or have that, in wanting to know if there's an avenue for them to offer that.
Yeah, so I might actually recommend that if the committee is looking or interested in moving this forward, that perhaps that be an amendment, that it be listed in the policy explicitly that that specific forum by that group specifically is allowed to be in another area.
Sure. Could we also just leave it as is, and then we'll, if someone were to come forward, then we'll just talk about it at that
I
time?
mean, you could do that too, sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with that, but I'm open to anyone else having a different idea. Any other comments or questions? Do you need a motion on this to move this forward?
Yes.
I'll entertain a motion to accept this work, and this isn't go to council, this is just.
So it would.
Oh, would go to council, okay,
Yep.
well, I will accept the motion to move this to the full council.
I make a motion to move the update to the policy governing public use of City Hall to council for Monday.
Second.
Okay, good, second. Any objection to moving this to the full council? Okay, so moved. And I believe that is the end of our agenda for tonight. So thank you everyone for all the conversation and the hard work.
I get a copy of